So I'm Dr. Helen Holmes. I am co-director of the Sustainable Futures platform, along with my colleague, Professor Alice Larkin. Go on, wave, Alice, who you will get to meet a bit later in the energy session. And we are really pleased to welcome you all here today to this third annual Sustainable Futures Conference in collaboration with our partners, and those are the Henry Royce Institute, Manchester Urban Institute, Manchester Environmental Research Institute, and the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change. So we've got a great day ahead for you all with lots of sort of different activities along with the usual conference type stuff. I'm just going to check I haven't forgotten anything on my little intro list. That changed. Nope. Nope. The clicker seems to have frozen. Lucy, you couldn't just go and get Alex for us. I'm going to carry on anyway, despite the technical problems. So what should be on the next slide is the agenda. And just to walk you through that, we've got some initial introductions from myself and the partners. We've got a fantastic keynote from Abigail Herron from Aviva Investors, who I'll introduce shortly, and then we'll move into the main conference sessions. There are quite adequate breaks throughout the day, and lunch will be, if I can read this very tiny slide on here, at 1:15. You'll have noticed where the coffee is, hopefully this morning, so lunch will be through there later on. Alex is going to come and save the day. We've also got going on some posters out there, which we really want you to vote for, ECR posters. So there's a QR code. So please vote for your favourite. There will be prizes later on. And we've also got some stalls from some of our collaborators as well for you to have a look at and engage with during lunch and the breaks. So a couple of housekeeping things. And again, I'm going to have to read these out, I'm afraid. Fire alarm, not planned today. So if it does go off,
Wednesday is the 9th.
it was Wednesday, so it's already been and gone. If it does go off, then please leave near the nearest exit, which for us in here is obviously the main entrance. The evacuation point is on the Parisa lawn at the back of the building. Toilets you've hopefully found, those are located downstairs on the lower ground floor. So you go through the double doors, through another set of double doors and down the stairs, and they're there. And there's an accessible toilet on this floor as well. You should have a very lovely seeded name badge, which you can plant after the conference. So we're very proud of these. All the links for everything to do with the conference are on that badge. So you can vote for your favourite ECR poster. You can sign up for our newsletter if you're not already signed up. And there's various other things, such as a feedback survey included on there as well. So hopefully the clicker is now working. So I'll quickly show you the agenda, then you've got that. And obviously we'll be talking you through it as the day goes on anyway. And then housekeeping we've seen. And then it's over to me to start to introduce the platform and also our other collaborators as well. So Sustainable Futures, if you don't know much about the platform, is one of 4 research platforms at the University of Manchester. The others being Creative Manchester, Digital Futures, and Healthier Futures. And the platforms were designed because of the size of the university. One of the biggest universities in the country. We've got approximately 40,000 students, 12,500 staff. So navigating this university can be quite difficult at times. Each of our faculties is the size of an average university. So the platforms were designed to try to enable different researchers from different disciplines to come together. And that is particularly important for issues such as environmental sustainability challenges, which, as we know, can't be solved by one discipline alone. So the platforms were created to bring people together, but also to reach outwards as well. So reaching into industry, into policy, and also into communities and to members of the public as well, to really bring those different knowledges together to tackle these different problems. So the platform's role is to connect, to drive, to amplify interdisciplinary collaborations. So bringing that research together, but also with those different partners and experts as well. So if you're not from the university, you won't be familiar with something called Manchester 2035, which we've all been hearing about if you are part of the University of Manchester. And this is our new strategy. And it's quite a bold and ambitious strategy for moving forward over the next 10 years, hence why it's called M2035, as it says on the slides. And that really is going to be putting our research right at the forefront of what we do. So it's going to be driving this cutting edge excellence that we're known for and amplifying that further. We're going to ensure that that research is informing teaching and learning as well. So bringing that excellence into our pedagogical spaces, but also broadening that out to think more broadly around the skills that we can offer our local communities and our industry and policy partners as well. And then another part of that is accelerating innovation. So how can we work with different partners to really add value and impact to the research that we do? So this is the aim of the platform, and that's what we'll be doing over the next 10 years. So we have 6 key themes that basically cover the breadth of environmental sustainability research, and those are resilience, and Ben is here somewhere. I can pick on him and get him to wave his arm. Oh, there we go. So that's led by Dr. Ben Parks, who you can find later on if you have any questions about resilience. We've got energy, which is led by our co-director, Professor Alice Larkin. Equity, which is led by Dr. Sarah Mander. Don't think he's here. Nature by Dr. Ian Thornhill. Oh, wonderful. Hi, Ian. And then materials we're currently recruiting for. We should have somebody in place by January. And then skills, which is led by Jen O'Brien. And Jen is staffing one of the stalls. Oh, she's there, but she was on a stall as well this morning. So any questions about any of those specific themes, then grab those relevant people today, or you can find them on our website as well. So I have one final thing before I hand over, and I'm frightened to press a button now. That's what. So this is really only relevant if you are a member of the University of Manchester. It hasn't actually been announced and not completely confirmed yet. But every year the university tends to run what's called an interdisciplinary research pump priming competition. And this is seed corn funding for innovative interdisciplinary ideas. So if you've got something that's a bit out there and a bit creative that involves different disciplines that you want to work on and you want somebody like as a pilot to get that started, then this might be the call for you. So it's aligned to the research platform. So you have to choose a primary and sometimes a secondary research platform. And we're expecting the announcement of this to be in the next couple of weeks. As I said, it's not been confirmed, so we're being a little bit naughty in announcing that here, but we're pretty confident that that's going to come forward, but it hasn't completely been decided. And there will be a more formal launch in January 2026. So if you have an idea today, it's one of these presentations that we're going to have today sparks an interest or a thought around a research idea, and you are internal, because as I said, it's only open to internal University of Manchester colleagues, then have a look at the UMRI competition when it opens. You'll need to align, if it's sustainability related application that you're thinking of putting in, you'll need to align that to one of the themes. So again, our theme leads, some of them are here today, or you can contact them separately. So enough of me talking about the platform. I'm going to hand over now to the first of our partners, which is the Henry Royce Institute. So over to Michaela.
Great, thanks, Helen. So hi everybody, I'm Michaela Keynore. I work as a Research and Business Engagement Manager at the Henry Royce Institute. The Royce is the UK's National Institute for Advanced Materials Research and Innovation. Our main hub is here on the University of Manchester campus, but our partners are dotted across the UK, including regional universities such as Liverpool, Sheffield and Leeds, and then more broad in the UK, including the likes of Cambridge, Imperial and Oxford. So as the UK's National Institute for Advanced Materials, the depth of research that we conduct helps to solve many of the challenges that we face today of today's society. So in particular, some of the research looks at how we would be able to look at supporting the energy transition. So for example, our colleagues down in Oxford are doing a lot in terms of new materials for energy storage and batteries for the future. Here in Manchester, some of our colleagues are working in biomaterials and looking at healthcare, improving healthcare for society in the future. And also then where I help to support with is looking at improving recycling technologies and enabling research in polymer science here within Manchester. But more broadly, Royce helps to, his main mission and activities revolve around the four main pillars. So first, we've got our shaping national direction in advanced materials research, where the Institute helps to support bringing together UK's advanced materials community and aligning that with the UK policymakers to ensure maximum impact of advanced materials research. We also provide access to world-class facilities and specialist expertise. And we also then help to support industry in translating materials research into real-world impact. Recently launched this week is our round 6 of the Industrial Collaboration Programme, which helps to support both industry and academia in translating materials research. So this total call is up to 130k for total project costs, and the deadline's the 16th of February. And so, yeah, we do have like a webinar, which is lunchtime today, but that if you want further information, I'll be around for most of the day. So feel free to reach out. And then finally, the final pillar of Royce's mission is to build future talent through targeted skills and innovation programs. Recently launched is our Applied Entrepreneurial Learning Programme, which is known as the Royce Catalyst. So the first cohort will be embarking on the 12-month journey in developing their entrepreneurial skills by looking at a commercial project, looking at advanced materials project, and looking to adapt and understand the commercialisation of a particular programme. So the next cohort for that might be in, I think, March later this year. So further details will be promoted in the new year. As I say, there's a few of my Royce colleagues started around as well today. So if there's anything in particular, let us know if you've got any further details. Thanks.
Lost one along the way then. There we go. Over to you, Karen.
Sorry, said Mary. Not paying attention. Hi, so I'm the director of Manchester Urban Institute. We're based within the humanities faculty. We're predominantly a group of social scientists, but with big crossovers with environmental science as well. We're a global research institute focusing on sort of rapid change and transformations within urban communities. And because what we're really interested in is interdisciplinary work, we also work with people in the Tyndall Centre, people within the Faculty of Engineering and Science, and within medicine and public health. So basically thinking about really trying to have deep understandings of urban processes and urban change, but we also want to provide a hub for our students and our PhDs and our early career researchers, as well as more advanced career researchers, to think about urban issues and urban challenges and set up really effective collaborations with external partners, both in the city of Manchester and Greater Manchester region, but also more far-reaching within the UK and internationally as well. So we work a lot with the policymakers, with businesses, with community groups and with community-based interests around a variety of different issues that we've grouped broadly under 4 challenge areas, which is the built environment that embraces things like housing, energy, repurposing, regeneration, and those sorts of situations around place and placemaking. We focus on transport and mobilities, particularly issues around mobility inequalities and people's inability to be able to get to employment. Green cities, which is about access to green space, particularly for a range of people in the urban environment, older people, younger people who need that for their health and well-being, which is the fourth theme that we cover. And then, as you can see, we've got these cross-cutting arrows. So thinking very much about inequalities, polycrisis, which means the fact that lots of things happen to people all at the same time and it's not like siloed, and urban governance as well. So that's basically us. At the bottom, there is the link. You can join. It's open to everybody. Manchester Urban Institute is a broad church inside and outside the university.
Great. Thank you, Karen. And next up, we have Tim from the Manchester Environmental Research Institute.
Thanks, Helen. So my name's Tim Foster. I'm Director of Manchester Environmental Research Institute, or MERI. So MERI is one of Manchester's, I guess, kind of virtual institutes. So we are kind of based across all of the three faculties. So our goal is really bringing together research expertise in the natural, social, engineering, health sciences to look at addressing kind of major UK and global environmental sustainability and development challenges. So our research is kind of structured around kind of three main thematic areas. First of which is land and resource futures, where a lot of the work we're doing is looking at how you balance competing demands for land, ecosystems, nature in general, between human activities like agricultural production, mining, urban development, with goals of conservation and restoration. We're also doing a lot of work in that space around monitoring of environmental change, particularly kind of land use and land cover change, using kind of new technologies like Earth observation and satellite remote sensing. Our kind of second kind of main sort of thematic research area is around global change and One Health, where we're really kind of looking at questions as to how is human impacts on the environment and the changes in the environment they're causing in turn feeding back on both human health, but also on ecosystem health and broader kind of well-being of society. And then our kind of final main area is really a more kind of methodological area, so around environmental data science and AI. So really looking at how we can exploit new data sets, new modeling, monitoring technologies and approaches to better understand and better manage our changing natural environments. That's also an area where we're doing quite a bit of work around kind of skills development, both for kind of postgraduate researchers within the university. We have a new Centre for Doctoral Training that will be starting up in September, looking at multi-hazard informatics and risk management, together with Loughborough and Newcastle University and the British Geological Survey. But also going forward, something that we're going to be looking to do a lot more kind of skills development and engagement externally with industry and policy in particular, working with the platforms, so Digital Futures and Sustainable Futures in particular. You can stop hitting the mic. You can find out a bit more about us on our website, so meri.manchester.ac.uk. If you do want to sign up to the Institute's mailing list or receive any information from us, you can get in touch with us on the email address that's at the bottom there. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And last but by no means least, we have Alice, who's got a dual hat on today because she's representing the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change as well.
Okay, so I'm just representing Tyndall on behalf of our director, who's Carly McLaughlin. I've been a researcher in the Tyndall Centre since 2003, so rather a long time. And we've just, you'll see the logo at the top there, we're just celebrating 25 years of the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research. The first thing I should say is that it's not just a Manchester entity. So the Tyndall Centre is actually a national research centre that was set up in the year 2000. And we have university partners in Fudan, in Newcastle, also in Bath, in University of East Anglia, and here at the University of Manchester. And in Manchester, we call ourselves Tyndall Manchester. We sit within the School of Engineering, so effectively like just a normal research group. But the thing that's not quite so normal about us is that we cover all different disciplines. And we sort of physically sit together as kind of an interdisciplinary research group. So we span the physical sciences, the social sciences, and engineering and environmental sciences. So all of those, like sort of that's a bit of a melting pot of a research group that sits together. And largely focuses on climate change, although over the years our remit is also extended as the challenges and as the agenda has kind of broadened out to things like the circular economy and looking at some aspects of material use as well. So there are about 50 researchers now, that's including our PhD researchers and PDRAs, postdoc researchers who are our lifeblood of the organisation. And there's some of our themes there that are just covering the research that we're focused actively on at the moment. So things like city scale and community climate change action, resilience to climate change, decarbonising aviation and shipping, which is the area of my own research, energy system decarbonisation, bioenergy and greenhouse gas removals, circular economy, just transition away from fossil fuels, and also water resource sustainability. So you can find out more at the website there. There's also a big centre, as we call it, website, just tyndall.ac.uk, or you could drop me an email. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alice. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our keynote address for the day, which is by Abigail Herron, who is the Global Head of Nature at Aviva Investors. Thanks, Abigail.
Thanks. So good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I've been working in sustainable investment for about 18 years now, across all the three pillars of today's conference. So nature, energy, and materials, and everything from antimicrobial resistance and aviation emissions through to zoonosis and zero-hour contracts. And at the moment, I'm working on carbon removal, so investing in projects like peatland restoration, mangroves, afforestation schemes in the developed markets and emerging markets that generate carbon credits, and wrapping them up into a fund for Aviva Investors. So I wanted to use the keynote today to zoom in on one of the themes of today, and that's nature, because it really feels like nature's having a moment at the moment, but that's not always been the case. So back in, let's say 2008, 2009, I read this book. Someone brought it to me at work, and it's called A World Without Bees by Alison Benjamin. So she used to be the environmental editor at The Guardian, also a beekeeper. And she showed in her book how pollinators are responsible for 1 in every 3 mouthfuls of everything we eat, especially fruit and vegetables. And just starkly showed the impact to business, to investment, of the global decline in pollinators and what that means. And one of the things that really stayed with me in this book was how in China, because there's been such widespread use of neonicotinoids and other pesticides that are implicated in the decline in pollinators, the only way to pollinate apples and pears, just common fruit that we take for granted, I had one this morning, is to get a tiny little artistic brush and by hand pollinate apples and pears, because there's no pollinators to do it for you. It was absolutely ludicrous. So that stayed in my mind. And it led me to do a piece of work at the University of Cambridge, looking at the global loss of pollinators on the average investment portfolio, which, is all a very serious piece of work, but I couldn't help but call it beaconomics. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to the companies that we invest in, talking to the board. And I really remember one conversation. So imagine you guys are the board of a FTSE 250 listed company that makes 70% of its revenue from orange juice. You can probably guess the company. So obviously no orange juice without pollinators. And in I come into the boardroom and I ask them what I think is a simple question to the chief exec, the chief risk officer and the chair. And I said, so guys, what you're doing, as a large investor, we're concerned that you haven't got this on your radar. So, put my mind at ease. What are you doing about the global loss of pollinators? Is this on your risk register? 70% of your revenue
depends on pollinators. And it was just tumbleweed. It was awkward. But, you know, you have to ask these difficult questions. And the caliber of their response was basically nothing. They didn't have it on their radar. I had to teach them about it. This was a few years ago. I would expect, especially after that kind of quite fiery meeting, that they'd have a better quality response now. But it just goes to show that kind of joining the dots between, you know, the poly crisis, or, you know, we call it the perma crisis, same thing, you know, and the boardroom, you know, those dots are not always being joined. So, you know, one of the things I like to do is make sure they are joined up. And it's just part of a general trend of nature kind of coming in from the cold. You know, sell-side broker notes now cover biodiversity as a core topic. NGOs such as Share Action are actively highlighting the role of nature in businesses. Just this week, we've had the UK government identify a whole range of different measures to mobilise natural capital as part of their environmental improvement plan. I had a call with DEFRA, for example, this week on the Woodland Carbon Purchase Fund. And I think it just feels also that there's a awareness, as well as transition plans on climate change, that nature and climate are two sides of the same coin, and you need transition plans for, you know, nature positive pathways as well. And even organisations like the Network for Greening the Financial System, which is all about central bankers, makes it very clear the loss between biodiversity and financial stability. And if you cast your mind back to Mark Carney, who was then the governor of the Bank of England's famous speech about the tragedy of the horizons, that was all about financial stability and climate change. So it's good to see nature's being wrapped into that conversation now. So it's a really exciting time to work in this space, but equally it's a terrible time to be working in this space, because we know global temperatures have been broken yet again all across the world. We know infrastructure and ecosystems and society are being pushed beyond breaking point. And even though, you know, today we're all wrapped up for winter, in some places now it's too hot to work, it's too hot to learn, it's too hot to live without risk. And so for those of us that are working in sustainability, these extreme weather patterns and events that we're seeing on the news or living through, you know, it's a visible reminder of why what we're doing really matters. But just as it feels like climate change is accelerating, and what we know it is, it feels like the political and cultural climate is decelerating around sustainability, and the dialogue's growing a bit more hostile. You know, there's been a backlash against ESG, for example, diversity and inclusion work, and COP30. I mean, the urgency of what we needed to be discussing and what came out of COP30, you know, there's a big disjoin there. So I wanted to spend the last few minutes before I get the sign on a couple of things. One of my favourite examples of co-creation, given that's the theme today, and secondly, how to say positive and how to say personally sustainable when working in sustainability. So one of my favourite examples of co-creation is the School for Systems Change in Finance. So this is something that we at Aviva Investors set up with Forum for the Future, EDGE and the Schools for Systems Change. And we did it for a very simple reason. Finance is both part of the problem and part of the solution. And we wanted to build an ecosystem of financial practitioners that understood that until we align finance with the Paris Agreement, with the Global Biodiversity Framework, with the SDGs, it's really unlikely that any of those are going to be met. So what we did, and we've had 3 cohorts so far, is we built teams of 30 to understand how the financial system works, importantly, how you can be a change maker within that, and how you can tilt the whole of the international financial architecture towards sustainability. So we've got a 4th cohort coming out, hopefully in the new year. And the reason I mention it, not just because of co-creation, but we're all change makers here today. And, you know, it does feel a bit surreal to be working in this environment at the moment when the world is literally on fire and leaders are retreating and not showing the courage that we need them to do. So how can we stay motivated in the last 1 minute? Oh my God. Right. First of all, remember, this is not our first rodeo. You know, in the early 90s, the attacks on political correctness are the same as the attacks on woke capitalism now. We've been there before. I left corporate law and joined investment the same week that Lehman Brothers crashed, you know, and CSR budgets were just slashed. We've been here before. So I imagine if you joined the sustainability world in 2020, 2021, at the height of the bubble, you'd be thinking, what have I done with my career? But it's just part of a broader kind of roller coaster. We've been here before, so don't panic. You know, we've survived this and the work has survived this. It's just adapting and evolving. So celebrate your wins. That seems like an act of defiance right now. So spotlight everything you can, even if it's small. You know, don't succumb to green hushing, and just continue. Climate change is not going to pause to give us a breather. You know, whether you're a leader in energy or nature or materials, business, finance, politics, you know, it's so important. The stakes are too high to slow down. So we need to dig deeper. We need to work smarter. We need to collaborate. And, you know, the pendulum is going to swing back to a saner equilibrium, and the progress only stops if we stop. So don't stop, but I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Abigail. That was really a great informative start for us. And I'm going to be using green hushing. I've not heard that one before, and beaconomics. So we're going to start with our first session of the day, which is going to be chaired by Tom MacDonald, Dr. Tom MacDonald, and there's all the information. So if our speakers would like to come up.
Hi, I'm Tom MacDonald. I'm a reader in sustainable materials in both the Department of Chemistry and also materials. And I'm also head of environmental sustainability for the School of Natural Sciences. So I'm really pleased and excited to kick off this session. I think it's great to see so many people here. And I think really co-creation is key to driving sustainability. So our first session is all focused on materials, and again with examples of co-creation there. Our first speaker is Torek. So I won't use too much of your time, Torek. So I'll get you just straight up. No, we got a very, very careful timekeeper. So make sure you keep on top of this. But over to you. And Torek's going to be telling us all about a really important topic in the area of flex plastic packaging.
Cool. No, I'm gonna use this one if that's okay. I'm gonna set the 20 minutes on my watch as well. Okay, yeah, good morning, everyone, and thanks also for the invitation to speak on this. So I'm going to be talking today about why we need an everyday flexible plastic packaging recycling assembly, and more specifically, why it is that I've actually gone about hosting this assembly. We held our first assembly a few months ago. It's an industry-focused assembly. It brings together stakeholders from across the supply chain to really tackle this issue around how do we improve flexible plastic packaging recycling in a UK context. So just to give a bit of a background, my name is Torek Holmes. I'm a Holdsworth Research Fellow with a focus on external engagement and impact. My project really focuses on the state of UK plastic packaging recycling, what really needs to happen to improve this. I'm a sociologist by training and through and through. What this means is typically I do a quite focused case study research. I spend a lot of my time at recycling plants, reprocessing plants, speaking to local authorities, trying to understand how it is that they process materials, how that could be done better. Yeah, and I've got this there. My wife complains to me, she said, why didn't you do something like marine plastic pollution? We could go to the Caribbean and stuff like that. I spend most of my time in places like Teesside and Coventry and stuff like that. But I enjoy it. So. Yeah, so I just want to take an opportunity. If you just cast your mind back, some of you might be able to, but if we were just to think back historically, back to 1955, there's this great article in Life magazine where we sort of celebrating this shift to disposable living and how that was going to free us and free up all this labour time, basically. And there's not actually a huge amount of flexible plastic packaging in this picture. But within 70 years, we've completely wrapped the world in plastic packaging, and a huge amount of it is flexible plastic packaging. When I'm talking about flexible plastic packaging, I'm thinking of all of the things like bread bags, refuge sacks, cat food pouches, dried food pouches, all of that stuff that sort of crumples up, and there's a huge amount of that in circulation. Just to give an idea of, in terms of this, it's a really short period of time in some ways. It's the whole of history. Within 70 years, I mean, within the UK, it's estimated that there's 215 billion items of flexible plastic packaging in circulation each year. That's a huge amount. When I start getting into the billions, I really start to struggle. Now, these materials are challenging to recycle, partly because they're so light and they blow around and stuff like that, which makes collection difficult. But they do hold a big portion of the packaging market. So you've got 27% of consumer plastic packaging is made up of flexibles, yet only 7% of that is currently recycled. We're set within the next year or so by 2027 in the first quarter, to be collecting flexible plastic packaging from households and businesses across the UK. So we're going to have a huge amount of this material that we're going to collect and we're going to sort. And at the moment, we haven't really got the reprocessing capacity to do anything with it. There's an interesting stuff in terms of the policy landscape. We've got extended producer responsibility coming in. What that means is there's going to be a price paid basically for putting particular types of plastic packaging on the market. Flexibles will probably carry a higher price, a higher tax, because they are problematic in terms of how hard they are to recycle. Whether or not we'll actually see shifts away from this material or not is difficult to know. So there's change afoot, basically. And something I've been thinking about recently is, and it links to what was said before about the sort of challenging political situation that we find ourselves, I think, in terms of sustainability. I don't think it's as easy to make the sustainability arguments as it was, partly to do with this issue around polycrisis and a number of different crises. But it's whether or not the circular economy is going to go boom or bust. And I think we're at a point, I was at an industry conference a few weeks ago, where that was one of the key questions. And there's a sense within industry is actually whether or not it's bust, and we can't afford the circular economy. That shouldn't be what we should be focusing on. And an example of that, if you look at reprocessing capacity in terms of plastic recycling in the UK, we have lost a huge amount of infrastructural capacity over the last 18 months. We're not seeing growth, we're seeing decline. And you've got this imminent policy change where we're going to get all of these materials and we haven't got the infrastructure to reprocess it. That raises a challenge in terms of organisational thinking about what do we need to do to overcome that bottleneck. And also just to say, I think, I mean, me and Helen have done some work on this about the challenges around the individualisation of responsibility and how we think of this problem. I think of this issue as an organisational problem. You know, it's about multiple stakeholders, the connections between those and alignments between them. That isn't typically, I think, the way that we do it. I think typically what we do is we think about consumers, or we think about packaging as if the material itself is the issue, or we think about policy as if policymakers in an individualised sense are the problem. And I think we need a bit more joined up thinking on that, and a bit more of a wider systemic sort of approach. Okay, so these are my sort of key questions. You know, what's needed to improve UK flexible plastic packaging recycling? And actually reflecting on being asked to speak today, what is the role as me as a researcher within the university to try and facilitate change in this area? And how do you even go about doing that? Okay, so clearly, I think we need in-depth, cross-cutting sort of organisational knowledge, development and exchange. And I think we need to think about alignments between stakeholders. Now, there's two really key understandings that underpins my approach to this. The first is that there's depth to value chains. So when we think of circular economy a lot of the time, what we think of is nice sort of siloed areas and arrows between them. What we lose there is we lose any idea of the depth of what we're talking about. And I think that's really important for thinking about the challenges that are faced when we talk about sustainable transitions. The other reason is that when you recognise that depth, I think you need to recognise the importance of in-depth opportunities for knowledge exchange and conversations and development. And sometimes I go to a lot of these industry events and there's a lot of 20-minute talks, not too dissimilar to today, but there isn't a huge amount of space made anymore for actually sitting down and doing focused work between organisations, which is what we've been trying to do with this assembly initiative. Just to give a little bit of the idea of the depth. You know, we've got 106 plastic recycling plants in the UK. There's a question mark there because that goes up and down all the time. That's probably less now. we've lost a lot of capacity in that area. We've got 107 different material recovery facilities across the UK. They're the places that sort waste, basically, and a lot of them work in different ways. We've got 210 waste collection authorities. I'm not going to keep reading these numbers. Basically, there's a lot of depth and a lot of complexity. Recently, there was a consultation how many companies would be affected by this extended producer responsibility rollout. And the estimate from DEFRA was between 7,000 to 10,000, basically. So when we start thinking about what's needed in terms of sustainable transitions and shifts, it's a huge amount of organisations that we're trying to get involved in. We need to think about alignments across. So this is where the Assembly comes in. So the first thing to say is, I mean, the way that I've approached this and designed this in collaboration with colleagues at the university, it's very much inspired by work that I was involved in with Helen, actually previously part of the One Bin to Rule Them All project. We in that project really focused on the challenges around households and consumers to do with plastic packaging. And that really inspired me to think, well, actually, this isn't about households and consumers. This is about supply chains and organisations that make those up, so to go and focus on them. It's also inspired a bit by a lot of industry work that's going on. So a lot of organisations that are involved in the Assembly and are working in this space as well. And the work that they're doing, it's clearly, this area is clearly a really pressing issue. But I don't think they necessarily always make the space for the type of in-depth conversations that the Assembly is affording, specifically by bringing multiple people from different areas of the supply chain together to discuss. So when I think it's really important that packaging designers, for example, understand what happens with their packaging when it hits a material recovery facility, where it hits a reprocessing plant. What are the organisational realities that underpin what can and can't be recycled, for example? So I just want to signal as well, this is really a collaborative effort in the sense, you know, myself, it's emerged out of my sort of fellowship research, but Michaela, who spoke before, and Jair, who's over there as well, were really integral to delivering the first Assembly. I think it's a good example, actually. I mean, the university, like Helen was saying, is a huge organisation in and of itself. And I think one of the benefits of being here is there is a lot of resources if you can draw on it to run these types of initiatives. Yeah, and Tom as well, you were obviously involved as well. So in terms of the first Assembly, so we held this a few months ago. We had 25 participants together for 6 hours on one day, all focusing on this issue of how do we improve flexible plastic packaging recycling in the UK. Just to be clear, in terms of the composition of that, we had multinational corporations, we had top brands, retailers, we had local authorities, we had companies that are involved in actually reprocessing plastic waste, both big chemical recyclers and mechanical recyclers, which is quite unique, I think, to have them in a room together and to watch them. They're very cordial, actually. They weren't duking it out, but which could be the case. And the provocation was basically this, you know, what needs to happen across UK organisations to help make the UK world leading in post-consumer flexible plastic packaging recycling? Now, this was an intentionally provocative question. One of the participants said, actually, maybe this is the wrong way to frame this. Maybe the UK shouldn't be seeing itself as an exceptional place and trying to compete. And maybe the idea of competition is one of the big problems. I was glad that they said that, because I think it speaks to the sort of framing of issues and how we think about what we're tackling. I still think it's a valid question to think what can be happening within the UK, partly because of how much waste we still export. And there's a question there about whether or not we should be exporting our problems elsewhere. It's a really important question. And we're still exporting huge amounts, and particularly a flexible plastic packaging, because we don't have the capacity, and actually other places will take this off our hands. And what happens to it once it goes, it's really hard to trace out. So there's some ethical sort of questions there. I just want to talk a little bit about the design. So we thought hard as a team to try and design an assembly when we got all these people together that would be engaging for them and try and stimulate discussion. We did not want to just get people together and have presentations and tell them what it was. We wanted to hear from them, and crucially to get them to speak with each other. So we designed this around this challenge card idea. So basically what we were asking initially was for each of them to write down what they saw as the key challenges and how they would define those challenges. looking back at different industry publications, the typical way in which we frame these is around issues of whether or not it's an economic challenge, it's a political challenge, it's an infrastructural challenge, it's a material challenge, it's a policy challenge, or something else. We intentionally left off, for example, environment, just to see whether or not anyone said, is this an environmental challenge or not? And actually what one person did. But this was a useful reflective exercise to really think about how we frame the problem. After that, we asked them to rank their challenges and organise them. So we got some 5 key priorities. It's from 2 groups. And then based on that, the hardest part of the conversation was about what were the required responses. I think it's really easy sometimes to say, look, these are what the problems are. But in terms of sort of co-creating some responses across organisations, what do they look like? What should be the priorities in this space? And that's where the conversation got particularly lively, I think it's fair to say. Okay, so I want to give a bit of a snapshot of the key findings. So there's a briefing paper that is going to be published imminently. There's 2 changes that have been made. It might be published today, might be at the end of the week that I've written up based on this. So there's 4 basically key challenge clusters. That's what we've called them. There's a lack of UK infrastructure, which I've already spoken to. The challenging material stream. It's really clear that there's broken end markets. And I think that's a really interesting issue around end markets. When we talk about end markets, we talk about them and say, look, there are no end markets for this stuff, but we don't really always talk about how we create those markets and what are the values that underpin the creation of markets. I'll speak a little bit more about that close to the end. I'm going to focus on the priority areas and the required responses. So really, the 3 priority areas around legislation, innovation, and this issue around and markets. So what was really clear was that the sort of legislative bedrock within the UK isn't strong enough. It's quite interesting, the amount of organisations sort of agree to say, stop us doing the bad thing, basically. Legislators in a way to stop us using some of this stuff. And what was clear there was really persistent pitfalls with policy. One of those examples would be like the plastic packaging tax, for example. Ultimately, it's continued to pay to actually not to pay that tax rather than investing in recycled content, partly because it's really hard to get, but also because the quality isn't necessarily there. Now, that leads to an issue around policy agility. And the organisations we were speaking with saying, look, actually, probably what we need is more agile policy changes. So, for example, with the plastic packaging tax, if it's clear that it's paying to pollute, essentially, or paying to use, then can we not have some agility with the policy where the price goes up in terms of how much the tax costs? What would that be? What would the impact of that be? Would that force more use of recycled content, for example? The point around innovation. Now, the really interesting thing was that it's not innovation in terms of we need something new. Actually, the organisations that we were speaking to were saying, what we need is innovation around how we upscale what we have. And there's some surety there, around some surety that links to the policy bedrock, around, for example, of whether or not chemical recycling or mechanical recycling is the favoured pathway, and what support is needed there to get investment, that we drive the infrastructural investment so that we've got places where we can send this stuff for it to be reprocessed, essentially. Now, there's a question here about whether or not we really push for grabbing the high-hanging fruit, because that's what flexibles are. They're much higher. They're not as easy to recycle as the rigids. So do we really push forward with trying to get this stuff recycled? Do we push in another direction, which is really driving to get it off the shelves and trying to push other packaging formats? What are the consequences of that? I think for a long time, we've probably had a little bit of stagnation in terms of policy around they're not being very clear on what pathway they would favour, and organisations then find it difficult to know what packaging formats say to favour, for example. There's also an issue that one organisation in particular was really, really strong on, was just on the real poor lack of data in the waste management industry, and that the idea still that we really don't have a handle on what's in circulation in terms of the composition of materials, and crucially, what actually happens with this stuff. And you see some of this stuff every so often. You'll see like news articles that come out where you've got like someone's put, there was an article in The Guardian a few years ago where they put a tag on some bales of plastic packaging just to see where it ended up, and the claims around a particular retailer about where it ended up, and the fact that actually, no, it was somewhere, I think in Romania or something like that. And that speaks to this issue. Can we harness the power of AI or data? And this is, I'm not a specialist in there, to try and figure out actually and be honest about what's happening with our waste and what could happen with it. Finally, this end markets issue. This is the one I'm really thinking about at the moment, because I've got a real set of, I don't actually know a lot of the time what we always mean by end markets. I mean, the idea surely with this stuff is that it isn't the end. That would be partly the point. But also about, you know, what markets are we happy with? Are we happy, say, for flexible plastic packaging to go into plastic lumber and to go into bin bags, which is actually where the majority of the 7% that's recycled go at the moment? Or do we really want it to go back into packaging, which fits with the circular economy ideal? And if so, if that's the focus, then what are the changes that are needed to actually do that? Yeah, so I'll move on actually just to the end, to the next step. So we had a really great, I think it was a great sort of first meeting with the Assembly. All of the feedback that we had was pretty positive. I'm looking at Michaela, sort of hope she's nodding, yeah. It was pretty positive. The idea is to host another one, and the next one is going to focus down and drill down into this issue of end markets. You know, this is partly to do with my academic interests as well. Like, what do these end markets currently look like? What should they look like? What do we want them to look like? Is this always just about economy, or can we have some bit more of a refined conversation about the economic and social value, sorry, the environmental and social value that's integral to these markets and their design? How do you even go with designing markets? We talk a lot of the time as if markets exist out there, as if they're not made by design, or we're not involved in making markets. I mean, as a sociologist, that doesn't work for me. So I think we need to have an honest conversation about that. So I'll leave it there. The next assembly will be, I think, in April. We're looking at those dates. What's good, you know, continuing in the meantime between the assemblies, what's been really great is the amount of emails and exchanges and discussions and meetings that have followed on, where I know that, for example, one of the big retailers that is there has gone to visit a recycling plant to get a better understanding of what happens in practice with their packaging that they weren't aware of, basically, in terms of how it's sorted and where it goes. There's also some other follow-on pieces that I've been writing based on this. I think I'll leave it there because I think I'm on time. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So.
Thanks, Tarek. I forgot to say, so what we're going to be doing is we've got our 3 talks and then we've got a panel session afterwards. So if you do have questions, please write them down because we'll be coming to you to trigger and facilitate that panel discussion. So our next speaker is Chris Egan-Morris. So he's a PDRA in Earth and Environmental Sciences. And your slides are already up. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I'm a postdoc working on a project that I'm going to introduce and talk about today, where we're trying to use biotechnology to rethink platinum group metal recycling and recovery. And we're doing this in partnership with our industrial partner, Johnson Matthey. And we're using life cycle assessment to sort of innovate and quantify the sustainability of this process. So I'll give some background on what are critical minerals and the circular economy, why platinum group metals are so important and their recycling, how we can use microbes to biorecover and recycle metals, and what is life cycle assessment. I'll introduce the EB Mine project, the team that I'm part of, our aims, and the process that we're developing. And then I'll show some of the LCA results from our early work that's helping us drive this process forwards and optimize it. So critical minerals are indispensable for modern technologies. A good example of this, there's 55 different critical minerals in your smartphone. Critical minerals are vital now for countries' economic growth, security, and industrial strategy. It's estimated that by 2040, clean technologies alone, clean energy technologies alone, will require 4 times as many critical minerals as we use globally today. You can see from this map on the right that critical minerals are not evenly distributed around the globe. They're often found in only a handful of economically mineable locations around the world. So as an example relevant to our work, most of the world's platinum is found in South Africa, and most of the world's palladium is found in Russia and South Africa. You might want to plug in your PC. Thanks. So it's vital for countries like the UK to develop a circular economy for these critical minerals once they enter our supply chains. We need to make these supply chains more resilient, and we can reduce the environmental impact of mining by doing this, but we need to enhance the capacity and technologies that we have for recycling. So a good example of this is with e-waste. Globally, e-waste is predicted to reach 82 million tons by 2030, worth about $66 billion. And the UK is the second highest producer of e-waste in the world per capita. This is largely due to following a linear economy model for so long. We take natural resources, make products, and then unfortunately dispose of them too often. This has led to a modern concept known as urban mining, where if we mine our anthropogenic waste, it actually contains a higher content of metals than some of the remaining ore deposits in the world. And a recent study estimated the UK could have up to £180 billion worth of metals buried in our landfill. So the aim here for a circular economy is, once we've consumed, to reuse and repair, and where we can't do that, collect and recycle these critical minerals back into our supply chain, minimizing waste and stopping them from leaving the supply chain. So the platinum group metals is the focus of the EB Mine project that I work on. These are critical minerals. They're also precious metals, amongst the rarest metals on the planet. They're very valuable. They're traded as financial assets, similar to gold. This gives them immense financial value, but they also have immense industrial value. So the PGMs have unique, excellent properties like catalytic activity, thermal stability, electronic stability, and chemical durability. They're used all across industries, and they're essential to the modern global economy. So they're used as to remove pollutants in our cars and catalytic converters. They're used as catalysts to produce pharmaceuticals, fine chemicals. They're used in biomedical devices, cancer treatments, high performance materials like jet engines. They're used in electronic circuitry, very importantly. And they're essential to green energy transition technologies, like they're used to make turbines for wind farms, and they're used to make batteries, and they're essential to the hydrogen economy as well for fuel cells and electrolyzers. So because of their lack of abundance, mining the PGMs is incredibly resource intensive. It uses a lot of energy, a lot of water, a lot of land, and their ore grades are declining, which means the energy consumption to do this will only increase. As I've already touched on, they're very rare, and they're only found in a handful of countries around the world. This makes their supply very vulnerable to environmental and politically and geopolitical disruption. Thankfully, because of their high value and scarcity, there's already a very strong secondary chemical recycling market. There's already a circular economy built around the PGMs. And research into this has shown that it has a 98% lower global warming potential than primary mining. In some cases, recycling rates for the PGMs actually exceed 95%. So this is a really strong footing. However, as a recent report came out a couple of weeks ago from the government, their new critical mineral strategy shows the demand for PGMs is set to increase tenfold over the next 10 years. This is going to put immense pressure on primary production and on chemical recycling. So chemical recycling is split into two main techniques: pyrometallurgy and hydrometallurgy. Pyrometallurgy is sort of the bad guy of the two due to its really high energy inputs. We're essentially melting things down. But hydrometallurgy is cleaner, but again, has very, very high chemical inputs and generates effluent liquid waste streams. Now, these contain dilute amounts of PGMs. This makes them very valuable, but also very difficult to recover the PGMs from. And they also have immense environmental burden due to their high acidity and mixed metal content. So on the EB Mine project, we're trying to use biotechnology to recover the PGMs from these effluent waste streams, revalorizing these metals and helping address this environmental management burden. So now's a good time to highlight our industrial collaborator, Johnson Matthey. They're the largest PGM refiner and recycler in the world. They're a British company and they're over 200 years old. They've played a pivotal role in developing the circular economy for the PGMs. So they're an excellent collaborator to have. They provide us with their effluent waste streams to work on, and we work very closely with their LCA team as well. So what is our biotechnology that I've sort of teased? So we work with a bacteria called Shewanella onodensis. This is a metal-reducing bacterium that was isolated from anoxic subsurface environment. Johnson Matthey's, but also e-waste, mining residues, whatever we can get a hand on. Now, in theory, this is a sustainable process, but we need to quantify that using life cycle assessment. So LCA quantifies the environmental impacts of products, processes, or services. It's an evidence-based evaluation of these environmental impacts. Crucially, it evaluates the entire life cycle of a process, starting from raw material extraction through production and operation to end of life. It identifies environmental hotspots within a process. And so we've used specifically the Recipe 2016 method, which breaks these down into 18 separate environmental impact categories. We'll come on to that later. Okay, so I've mentioned EB Mine a few times. This is the project title, Engineering Biology for Critical Metal Recovery from Industrial Waste Streams. So this is a project led from the University of Manchester, PI John Lloyd, in close collaboration with Johnson Matthey, funded by the BSRC, and then we work with the Quadram Institute in Durham on the engineering biology side. BSRC invested recently over £100 million to innovate engineering biology solutions to global challenges such as critical mineral recycling. This is a very large, multifaceted, interdisciplinary project working across the schools of natural sciences, biology and engineering here at Manchester. I'm only going to touch on two aspects today, microbial biorecovery and life cycle assessment, and that's done between as an Earth Environmental Science and the Tyndall Centre at Manchester and Johnson Matthey. So on the right here we have a very simplified sort of circular economy flow diagram, and this is sort of how we hope things will go. The current sort of chemical recycling route is in blue. So end-of-life products go into pyrometallurgy and hydrometallurgical treatment. Pure PGMs come out the end, and these are fed back into application. However, the waste streams from this are conventionally treated in a very slow and costly process and fed back into the pyrometallurgical step, which is very costly. In EB Mine, we want to develop a biorecovery route that treats the waste streams, but also feeds the PGMs back into the hydrometallurgical step, making the whole process much more sustainable. We aim to do this by using engineering biology to genetically modify Shewanella's biorecovery abilities, and then we want to optimize this on Johnson Matthey's industrial effluent and use life cycle assessment to quantify the improvements that we can generate. Okay, so this is our current or early stage process in the lab, and the great thing is it does work. So we break this down into a few phases. The first is the growth of the bacteria. So we do this aerobically at first. We transfer this to anaerobic growth. Then we harvest the cells, this lovely pink colour in the top right. Then there's the treatment phase. So we have our pre-processed Johnson Matthey effluent. We add in our cells. You see at the start it's this sort of murky colour. After a few minutes, we get this colour change that tells us that our enzymes are working. We're getting our bio-nanoparticle formation. After a few hours, the cells settle out and we can harvest them, and then we have our bio-nanoparticles. These can be used as catalysts, they can be recycled. And so this is the process that we've modelled with LCA. And we did this in order to evaluate potential impacts of 3 different PGM routes. So we're comparing primary mining, secondary chemical recycling, and our new biorecovery route. This is a cradle-to-gate assessment, so we start with resource extraction for primary mining, end-of-life products for secondary recycling, and our effluent collection for biorecovery, and we're modelling this all the way through to PGM recovery. And our functional unit in green there is a kilo of PGMs produced. So it's important to note that we didn't do the work here on the primary and secondary production. These were results given to us by the International PGM Association, OPA. But what we did was modelled our biorecovery process. It's a lab scale process, so we did something called an ex ante LCA, which allows us to model this lab scale process scaled up to an industrial scale. So these are the results from that comparative analysis. We see, so our biorecovery route is in blue and orange. So chemical recycling came out on top, and our industrial scale biorecovery process performed worse than mining in all but one category, mineral resource scarcity. These results were a little bit scary at first, but they make sense when you go down into it. So the first thing to point out is that we're modelling a very much unoptimised lab scale process. We're magnifying all of those inefficiencies in the ex ante LCA process. And this also highlighted the fact that we weren't exactly making fair comparisons. We're not trying to replace these production routes with our biorecovery process. We're trying to add it onto the end of chemical recycling to make it more sustainable. There's like a polishing step. So we're not working with the same quantities of PGMs. But now we can go into how modelling this with LCA is helping to optimise the process. So the 2 key parameters that this highlighted were biomass yield and PGM recovery capacity, and these are 2 challenges that we're working on. So with biomass yield, this is a scale-up engineering challenge. We've already been optimising our growth conditions. We'll touch on how LCA is driving that process. And we're working on immobilising cells in order to treat large, continuous treatment of large volumes of effluent instead of the small batch scale process that we modelled. And then in terms of PGM recovery capacity, this is an engineering biology challenge. So we're engineering the cells to have improved metal handling and toxicity resistance, and we're overexpressing their bioreduction enzymes. So LCA is able to predict what improvements in these parameters can actually bring to our process. So with biomass yield, we see that only a 5-fold increase in biomass yield can actually reduce all burdens by more than 70%. If we go up to 20-fold, this increases even more to 80, 90+%, and that's a very feasible goal for us to reach. Interestingly, if we increase better than 20-fold, we actually see very marginal increases at this point. So it gives us a target to aim for. If we break down our recovery process into its inputs, then we can see what the primary hotspots in our process were. And it actually turned out to be the anaerobic growth medium that we used, responsible for 64 to 88% of total burden. When we broke this down into its components, it was actually one phosphate mineral that was the largest single contributor across 17 of 18 categories. This is due to phosphate rock mining, involves a lot of land use and ecotoxicity effects. Now, as microbiologists, we would never have known this, but when it was pointed out to us, we could go back to the lab and reassess our media, and we found that we could actually massively reduce the overall phosphate content in there, and we can eliminate this particular mineral from our medium and use a different source, massively driving down this hotspot. Another example here is our media components. We're using animal product-derived sources of amino acids, so contributing to environmental impact through land use and global warming. Again, we can go back to the lab and reassess. We isolated the media components that most improve growth in our bacteria, and we can now replace those animal-derived sources with plant-based sources of amino acids. We modelled this, and it massively reduced the burdens, again, 80 to 90%. So we can make our process more sustainable by turning ourselves vegan, which is nice. Okay, so just to end here, we want to try and commercialise this process and bring it to market, and not just for the PGMs, but for a wider range of metals across a wide range of applications. And we're not the only people sort of working towards a circular bioeconomy. So there is this Elemental Engineering Biology Mission Hub. It's a big consortium which Manchester is an important part of. I'd encourage you all to check them out if this sounds of interest. They're working on developing solutions for environmental processing and recovery of metals across a wide range of applications. So just to end here, just to summarise, EB Mind has developed a PGM biorecovery process that works really well at lab scale on real-world industrial effluent, which I don't think anybody's ever managed before. And now we're working at making this more efficient at its scale by embedding LCA in our process development from the very beginning. We're finding sort of shortcuts to do this. It's really effective. So we're highlighting the environmental hotspots early on in the process. We're identifying the key parameters that we need to optimize for sustainability, and it can even provide us with quantifiable targets to give us those improvements. Cool. So that's all from me. A huge thanks to the EB Mind team, this is Sunderland, in particular John Lloyd, the PI, and the LCA team, Dr. Jamie Lee, and Professor Alex Gargo-Schmidt. Huge thanks to Johnson Matthey and the BBSRC, and thank you all for listening.
I'm doing well. I enjoyed the talks. Today I'm going to talk about from ideas to impact how SIM supports sustainable innovation. I'm Dr. Samira Malik Mohammadi, application scientist at SIMS, Henry Royce Institute, University of Manchester. I'm essentially a chemist, and my background is in polymer chemistry, nanomaterials, and biomaterials. Yes, who we are, what we do, and why it matters. SIMS is the Center of Expertise in Advanced Materials and Sustainability, which connects businesses, researchers, and innovators to help make materials more sustainable. We essentially bridge the gap between academia and industry and help commercialize sustainable material and technologies and co-create innovations that make existing material more sustainable and help businesses to scale up and cut waste and cost. And why it matters, SIMS help businesses to fix their real problem using greener materials, gives companies access to world-class facilities and experts, and help businesses stay competitive with sustainable design and boost economic growth through sustainability. SIMS is led by a consortium of partners, including Russian Development Agency, University of Manchester, Henry Royce Institute, National Physical Laboratory, Center of Process Innovation, and National Composite Center, and the whole program is led by Russian Development Agency. We have access to 500 million of assets locally to deliver to businesses. And let's see how we unlock a national asset to regional innovations. We make it easier for companies of any size to work with University of Manchester, academics, and also Henry Royce Institute, scientists to deliver and run sustainable projects. From early discovery through development can be covered by University of Manchester and Henry Royce, and then scale up and demonstration can be covered by our partners, NCC and CPI, and also NPL can help us to provide measurements, validation, and standards, so we can cover almost all TRL scales. And SIMS help regional businesses in 4 clear ways. In short, we help companies develop new advanced material, sustainable materials. We address supply chain gap so businesses can have access to green materials for their work. And we make it easier and faster for companies to scale up their sustainable products, and also we connect universities, RTOs, and businesses to add fast and agile working method we have. I just mentioned we are working in agile way. How? We have 2 core teams. First, we have a business development team. They are linking companies to SIMS scoping projects, managing NDAs and IPs, and supporting businesses through the whole journey. And then we have application scientist team. We are working closely hand in hand with the BD team to help deliver projects and provide technical support. We have different skills and experts in the team, including polymers, polymer composite, nanocomposite manufacturing engineering, biomaterials, modeling and simulation, and packaging. You can easily guess we can be material, and we are material and sector agnostic. You can see the diversity of work we can do. For example, in collaboration with our partners, we develop sustainable polymers coating for ceramic tiles, sustainable and eco-friendly adhesive for fabrics and plastics, circular economy of carbon fiber, graphene-enhanced lithium-ion batteries, and polymer-based coating for laparoscopic surgery lenses, removal of PFAS and contaminants from our water supplies, doing LCA and DFT modeling for product development. And let's see our impact so far by numbers. They are significant, actually. We've been founded for 2 years now, and we receive about 200 industry engagements so far, half of them from the Greater Manchester area, and we successfully deliver 48 projects. We received 6.6 million industry investment, and we've had 33 academics on board so far. Let's review some case studies together, but not in detail, actually, due to the confidentiality of work we do. I just want to go to some summary of work. First case study is about real circular economy success with Hayside. And this is a very good example of how we work with established local businesses. Hayside is a company located in Greater Manchester area. They make traffic cones using recycled PVC flooring waste, and they approach us with the challenge. Their PVC waste feedstock was mixed, unclear, actually unclean, dirty, and inconsistent. Their feedstock contaminated with glue, cables, coppers, etc. So, and they didn't have any process of sorting, cleaning, and mixing the materials. As a result, you can guess their cones were weak and brittle and failed testing. What we did at Sims was we firstly test their waste PVC feedstock chemically, thermally, and mechanically, then identify problem materials, and then provided a way to sort it out. Then we created a new mix ratio of materials and developed a standards data sheet for the recycling process. What was our impact? We successfully improved the recycling process, make it consistent and repeatable, which is very important for all companies. We actually help them to produce a competitive and sustainable material, sustainable cone. We actually could help make their manufacturing and recycling process cost effective as well as energy efficient. And what was the next? They already started a second project with us to make their material and cones even more sustainable, which is great. Actually, we could keep them engaged again. Next story and next case study is about environmental impact assessment of smart milk packaging. It's a great example of how we support a startup in their innovation journey. We work with Fresh Cake. They have developed a smart milk cake system to cut plastic and glass waste. They use reusable stainless steel cake to reduce waste and keep milk fresher for longer time. The idea behind it was really good and beautiful, but they really wanted to understand how their system compares to traditional packing system, and more importantly, they wanted to know sustainability hotspot to reduce environmental impact. And there was no answer to this challenge unless doing a cradle to grave for life cycle assessment. We carried out with application scientists we had in the team. We engage with the Pershcake and also the supply chain to carry this out this LCA. We model the packaging system versus the traditional one, and the results show Pershcake system carbon footprint is 50 to 70% less compared to traditional system. The Pershcake system also significantly reduce water use for washing and resource depletion and other impacts to environment, and more importantly, we identify hotspots that can reduce environmental impact in area that currently accounts for half of their total carbon footprint. And let's go to the next one. The third case study is about developing sustainable coating for bio-based tile. You might see their tiles in the kitchen here, sister building. We work with Decal. You might know the previous name, Decal Bio. We work with Decal to develop and manufacture, Decal develop and manufacture sustainable bio-based tiles with the low carbon footprint and environmentally friendly manufacturing process. They approached us with a big challenge. They wanted to make their tiles more resistant to water, to scratch, and also chemicals that can be better compete with traditional energy-intensive ceramic tiles. We make it possible with application scientists at Henry Royce Institute in collaboration with 10 National Physical Laboratory NPL researchers and academics at University of Manchester. We screen and develop a variety of coating agents for this company. I've been involved in this challenging but interesting project. Firstly, we provide them with a list of coating agents, and then we help them to make a good advice down selection by doing scratches, water and chemical resistant tests, conducting weathering tests, and also complete a life cycle assessment to confirm the sustainability of tiles. And we provided actually a consistent coating methods, including deep coating and also spray coating. The support from SIMS helped them successfully secure additional funding. That was great for a startup. That was about 700K. Now they're working on a scale up and commercializing. And next slide is about grant challenges and technology development. Actually, I just want to make the story short for you. This is how we turn recycled carbon fibers to high-value products. Actually, it's a very collaborative work with the collaboration of partners, including NCC and NPL. We carried out this high-impact work. Firstly, we received recycled carbon fiber from a company named Signet, and then we quickly do quality control in collaboration with our partner NCC and NPL, and then we do different kinds of mechanical testing. They are very advanced, so they are not accessible for all companies to do. And then we do surface treatment, and after that we do surface analysis and again thermal and mechanical specific tests. We make and fully test a real composite after that in collaboration with our partner again, and in the last step we can demonstrate it in high-value products, including wind turbine blades, aerospace, car parts, hydrogen tanks, and also other products. We are developing important national technologies with input from Industry Advisory Group by showing how the technology works. We prove that recycled carbon fiber can be used in different high-value products, which is great actually. This reduces risk and help companies to feel confident to use recycled materials. And yeah, this year Sims won the Composite UK Sustainability Award due to their efforts in this area. And yeah, we don't just solve problems, we take on grand challenges. We can tackle big challenges with multinational companies, then translate the knowledge to practical and business-focused projects. In the next slide, you can see a testimonial company that we work, and we run a high impactful project. And yeah, enough time I can play. Sunny should be. I don't really have a laptop. Carbon fibre has this massive impact in terms of the amount of energy it takes to Lubrizol is a partner in progress with key industry players, leveraging resources and expertise to accelerate development and commercialisation of innovative solutions. This project is helping to address challenges in circularity with carbon fibre reinforced thermoset composites. So the project's really about looking at the circularity of carbon fibre. Carbon fibre has this massive impact in terms of the amount of energy it takes to prepare it in the first place. So trying to recycle that is really key. We're really trying to approach it from the chemistry side in terms of developing the right additive and formulation technologies to resize the fibre and rejuvenate the properties that are lost during the recycling process. The insights that we've got from working with Sims and specifically with the Royce and the University of Manchester have really been around that degradation mechanism and the approaches of how to measure performance in those systems. They've given us some really good insights into the behaviour of our chemistry.
So carbon fibers are being used extensively in both automotive and aerospace industries. But most of the products made of carbon fibers are being dumped into landfills at end of life. So my role is to recycle carbon fibers using decom technology and then optimize the parameters to apply sizing on recycled carbon fibers to regain their properties so we can use them in industrial applications.
This project is a perfect example of multidisciplinary collaboration. Through Sims, we have worked closely with Lubrizol and academic teams across Herron Institute and University of Manchester, which bring complementary expertise from material chemistry to mechanical engineering to ensure the solutions that we are developing are both high-performing and sustainable.
This is a robotics and texture composites lab, and in this lab we take carbon fibers and convert them into various three-dimensional artifacts. For example, the machine behind me is a 3D robotic weaving machine. Most of the machines are actually developed from scratch in this lab using principles of robotics. All these machines are employed in creating various freeforms for CM's project.
The Royce and University of Manchester have really been equipping their labs with the latest process technology for circularity, especially in composites. One particular example is the new decom unit that they've installed. This really gives us access where otherwise it would be expensive or difficult for a company to access directly to kind of real-world scaled materials that would be generated from these types of recycling processes, and hence we can design and deliver a solution to those challenges that's going to be ready for the marketplace. Okay, cool. Actually, I just mentioned that we've been funded for 3 years now, and funding runs until March 2026, and we're get together a new bid to continue our impactful work in this region. So if you have any idea or challenge, please approach. We would like to hear from you. Maybe we can help and collaborate with each other in the next phase. If you have any question or need more information, you can scan this QR code, or you can approach one of our RB team members or one of our application scientists or our line manager here, and also our program manager. Thank you very much for your attention.
Again, we'll be really keen to take questions from the audience, so please think about questions. I'll get us started. But, yeah. So I think one of the things that really comes across all the talks today is the kind of challenges of getting from insight or understanding in research to actually, driving change in the real world. And we saw some great examples of that in your talk as well, Samira. But I really wanted to hear a little bit about what are those principal challenges from getting from a scientific insight to actually making something make a difference. Chris, you happy to get us started?
Sure. Thanks. So I think one of the main things that we're seeing at the moment is in the commercialization space. So there's a lot of help, a lot of funding, a lot of push from UKRI, from the university around commercialization, which is excellent. But there's this valley of death sort of concept around going from academia into venture capital. And yeah, that's definitely something that we are trying to plan a path towards. And I've heard lots of people talking about that as being quite a serious sort of issue in the UK space. And then another area, especially around our work, is around regulation. We're working with engineering biology, and there isn't necessarily the field is moving quicker than the sort of government can sort of come up with regulations for it to follow, and I think that sort of potentially de-incentivizes investment or adds risk to investment, having that regulatory uncertainty around things like genetically modified organisms in environmental technology. It's quite a specific example, but I think we see similar things across, say, AI, where the regulation isn't necessarily keeping up with innovation. My thoughts.
Cool.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The main issue, I think, would be scaling and also transfer from lab to industry. There will be many challenges. We are working at in the lab actually under completely controlled conditions. But whenever you want to scale it in the industry, in a company, that will be sometimes very challenging. And most of companies that we're working with them actually, they're looking for a very clear process of manufacturing on the scaling. They don't take risks because it will be time consuming, energy consuming for them, and also it's very costly for some companies, specifically startups. So at the moment, I think scaling and also transfer from lab to company, lab to industry.
How do you de-risk that? Is there an approach that works best for kind of de-risking that scale up or that transfer from a large scale to a large scale industrial process? Key things.
Yeah, actually for composite industry, we are trying to make it very de-risk and make the company confident enough to use recycled materials. But for some sectors it's possible for us, but for others it's not. But yeah, actually one of our mission, one of the most important mission, is just make the companies confident enough to try different procedures, very clear one, and make profits in a shorter time. So yeah.
Yes, I don't live this stuff in terms of thinking in the same way that you're actively engaged in working, I suppose, at the coalface with organisations and innovating and trying to scale and stuff. I think we've got a really important question to ask though about scale and what we're scaling towards. We tend to discuss this stuff in terms of lab to industry scale. So which scale are we happy with? Because actually I think sometimes the more sustainable changes
and aren't necessarily going to match up this industry level shift, if that makes sense. Because you're going to be competing with regimes that are already in place with vested interests, which make scaling really hard. All of the people I speak to say that the issue is scaling. And I say, also, how big's good enough? Yeah? To give an example, if we look at reuse systems, for example, one of the big issues that they face is scalability. I think partly that's because they see themselves as trying to replace a system of provision premised on convenience, which is largely global in a lot of ways if you look at supply chains. And that's the wrong scale to think about reuse systems. So my sense in a sort of social sciencey way is to think critically about what are we scaling towards. And that jump between the lab to industry, they're huge steps. Are there steps in between? Or are we setting ourselves a task that we're just not going to be able to meet? And maybe we need more sort of fundamental shifts in terms of the scaling of systems of provision. Yeah?
Any questions from the audience? We've got to go to the middle here and then
Thank you. I'm Patty Doran from Sociology. I had a question about collaborations though. So, I was thinking of your assembly, Torek, but it kind of applies to the partnership work that you have done as well. And I'm wondering, who's not in the room? How did you engage those 25 people to get there? Who was not there that you wanted to be there? And how do we make our networks outside of our bubbles? When we're trying to convince people about the things that we're passionate about researching, how do we bring in the new people that are the ones that really need to be there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We spent, me, Michaela and Jair spent, I think if we reflected back on it, it was probably about 6 months trying to find out and figure out which organisations would be interested in participating firstly, and then also trying to convince them to be involved. And lots of emails, particularly to the bigger companies, because their time is really precious. There's a thing around time as well, and like how precious that is to people being involved in these types of initiatives and stuff. In terms of how we selected it, one of the key things we were trying to do, which I think was unique, was trying to get representatives, professional representatives from different areas of the supply chain. So we worked really hard to try and get some representatives from chemical recycling. Now, chemical recycling, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, can be seen as it's a bit more controversial, it's less established than mechanical recycling. There's lots of challenges around energy use and such like. Now, at industry events, there's lots of chemical recyclers and there's lots of discussion of that. But interestingly, it proved a little bit difficult to get them to come to this. We did manage in the end, and thankfully the conversations went. It was lively, but not too alternatives to that, I suppose. In terms of who wasn't in the room, we intentionally didn't ask anyone from DEFRA and policy. And the reason for that was that we wanted to be able to have a frank conversation about what would be desired from policy. And my sense was that we'd had someone from policy that might have been shut down in a way to say, look, oh no, we've got that covered, EPR does that, or simple recycling does that. And the next assembly, we might involve policy a bit more, but there was a reason for that. And I think it set the stage for a bit more of a frank conversation in some ways. So yeah, there was definitely selective work going on, and it was a lot of work just to get people there.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on the follow-up on that? What do you do to build the track record to get people to come and give their time? Because you're saying come here for a day and engage in this thing. It's the first one that had been run. So what do you do to really make sure that people would come to that event? Because I guess lots of us would really love to trigger an event like yours to gather those stakeholders, but it's the first one's really hard to get that momentum for, and I think yours was successful. So what do you think was key there?
Be sound. I don't, be personable. Try and meet people if you can. Try to go, if you can set up meetings or meet people online. there was one person in particular I emailed through, I had a 3 email rule. I won't go beyond the 3, I don't know if it'll be whatever. Finally, I got a response, and we set up a Teams call, and I could tell really that it was going to take some convincing that needed to be done based on them getting a sense of actually what I was about, what I was interested in, and what we were looking to do. So I think you've got to put the time into actually meeting and talking to people.
I guess building the relationships, and even if it's just building them through an online meeting, it gets them, they have belief in what you're going to offer in that event.
Yeah, I think being personable helps, and yeah, trying to go and engage with people, and also trying to be a bit understanding. A lot of the organisations I've worked with, they're not bad people. There's realities to the work that they do. There's real sort of economics, for example, to their decision making and what underpins that, and trying to understand their capacity to change. If that makes sense.
We have another question for this, thank you, and then who's it back there? Thank you. So that just yeah.
Hi, so coming from the social sciences also, thinking about these sort of lab-based innovations, I can see the environmental benefits are being considered in your life cycle assessment, but I can't see the sort of economic and social impacts of them being considered. And maybe that's a little bit also around going from lab to scaling uptake. It's like, what are the cost benefits? What are the cost savings of doing it your way? What are the skills implications? What is the social benefits of doing those things? Or are they disbenefits? Health benefits, all of these other things that are actually part of why a company or an organisation or a policymaker might be attracted to what you're doing. And I think that actually I'm quite glad that there are regulations there to make sure that things don't spiral out into society too soon before we're ethically and morally happy with what's being produced in a lab. And so I think I would really encourage you to add that dimension. You do local life cycle assessment, you do environmental impact assessment, but I think more like a social impact assessment, economic impact assessment, also important.
I mean, Chris, could you comment on that? I guess thinking about how if social considerations are considered, but I guess economics probably have been considered in the building of the project. But could you just expand on that?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, absolutely great point to raise. And yes, obviously in the lab, none of that's being considered. But yes, in the scale up, in particular, is where those conversations need to begin. We were at an engineering biology meeting recently with the BDSRC where they were bringing social scientists in to try and make us all have those discussions and try and decide as a community where we need to drive those discussions forwards. And yeah, they were quite difficult conversations actually. Not a lot of the scientists in the room had loads of things to offer, including myself. Yeah, I think cost-wise, we're on top of sort of quantifying that with partnerships and agreements, but yeah, social benefits. So one of the main things that comes to mind is we're trying to remove toxic metals. We're trying to make sure they aren't being put into wastewater, or at least they're being covered in a more sort of sustainable way. There's obviously the question around if we're using genetically modified organisms. How do people feel about those? That's a really complicated question. And again, my point about the regulation is that there isn't really anything in place at the moment. So there is a sort of top-down sort of approach to that from people in government regulation would be really beneficial for us going forwards. Yeah, that's a really good question.
And then Samira, from your perspective, are there any key, how in SEAMS are, well, if and how in SEAMS are kind of social considerations brought in, but then again, how are the economic bits that are pretty so now brought in? So quickly, just 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the nature of our work is just being interdisciplinary and interested in sector across work. So after doing each studies or doing collaborative work, we try to publish it like a case study, engage more people, engage more companies, specifically SMEs, and also sometimes bigger company, get established one. And try to prepare a testimonial like this to show the impact to the society. So in terms of benefit to social and to society, I think we actually perform very well in terms of releasing our impact, the impact of our work, the impact to society, not only society but the nature, environment. We perform very well. Okay.
We had a question, I think it's just back here, if that's all right.
Thank you. So far, I noticed, whether it's policy or academics in UK, the focus is on recycling more effectively, efficiently, how to recycle. But what I find is that in UK, a lot of the manufacturers produce, very high quality plastics, which is actually a waste because probably it costs a lot compared to the food in it, as the supermarkets and so on. In the US, the approach I find, North America, Canada, and US, is very different. They use as little plastic as possible. For example, if you buy a juice, they have a container of juice, and then you bring your own packaging, standard size, and then you pay for the juice without using the packaging. Or even nuts, peanuts, and so on, or even detergent, liquid detergent. So you don't even need to recycle. Recycle itself is not cheap, and you have a bit of plastics, paper, all stuck in together. And one of you mentioned, you export it to another country. That alone, is very carbon intensive. So why not the UK adopt the North American model? Thank you.
Probably, sorry, I'll go to you. I can comment on that.
Yeah, so, it's an interesting point. I'd be very hesitant to adopt the North American model. Waste management in the States is pretty atrocious, basically, in comparison to other places, as I understand it. There's also some around this section on materials, right? So, in some instances, less plastic isn't better always. So we could use less plastic and have a lower grade sort of packaging, for example, that was lighter to produce, less economic. But that would still probably end up in landfilling or incineration because it's not recyclable. Yeah? Sometimes actually what you need is a higher grade plastic, a quality PET bottle, for example, that allows and enables recycling. Now, I'm not just a champion of sort of just recycling. I think we need to reduce the amount of waste that we produce across the board. We need more reuse. But ultimately, and in a sense pragmatically, we're still going to be left with a lot of packaging that needs to go into recycling. And in terms of improving that, sometimes less plastic isn't always better, because it negates recycling processes, for example. But you're right, in terms about the multi-material stuff and how complicated that makes things. One of the big issues, just quickly with flexibles, for example, is typically they're really heavily branded. So your confectionery wrappers, for example, if I was to say purple confectionery, you probably know, yeah, probably know. Or any type of colourant that's put in really limits the amount of recycling that you can do. That takes us to a different issue around practices of packaging design and how much recycling fits into that. Packaging design is based on 3 principles: protecting, preserving and promoting products. It's not about recycling. And actually, the promotion of products negates recycling, and in some instances, so does the protection. So, yeah.
I think also, just to comment, I think some of the European markets are probably better at
reducing the amount of packaging, and obviously there's deposit return schemes in some regions that have recovered more material. I think there's a strong drive in kind of sustainability in plastics, in packaging, to reduce the amount of packaging on the market and trying to move, as Tarek was saying, more to reuse models. But I think the economics of the system are obviously strongly opposed to that, in the sense that most of the economics for packaging producers is about the massive packaging they put on the market. So, and I think also for us as citizens, we have a convenience penalty, and it's, I think, one of the challenges with trying to have more reuse packaging, so packaging you take in and fill, has been that actually it's not very well uptaken in many trials that we've done to date. But I think it's a really big, and I think fundamentally reducing would be a big opportunity. But
if I just quickly, I totally agree. But also about an honest conversation about what reduction involves. So actually, the flexible, what you're seeing is a lot of types of commodities being shifted into flexible because it's lightweighting. Now the key thing there is carbon footprint. Now there's a well-meaning shift there, but a lot of the times that shift means it's not recyclable, and what's not considered is the carbon footprint that's connected with that shift. So there's a tension basically, but I think it's good to have a conversation about, carbon footprints and such like.
So I think we have time for one more. No, we don't. I'm just going to So I'd just like to say thanks to the panel, and I think everyone's going to be around the rest of the day, so if you do have questions, just come find people. We really want to continue making this happen.